we have such a strong headwind. It's Easter Sunday. I'm in Cornwall in the southwest of the UK. Going to cycle the Camel Trail, which is a traffic-free bike trail. It's an old disused railway line. But first, we're staying at one end of it, and we've got to cycle to the other end so we can cycle back. First doing a hilly section to the beginning, and we have such a strong headwind. Oh my god. But then hopefully when we actually do the trail, we'll have a tailwind. There's a lot of hills. It's classic how Cornwall, same as where I live in Devon, it's just steeply up, steeply down, not much in between. But the Camel Trail follows the river, so it's pretty much flat, but it's actually slightly downhill the way we're going, so it's going to be free speed. Made it to the beginning of the Camel Trail, and now it's flat / downhill. Yes! Cafe stop number 1 complete, and this is the start of the Camel Trail. So because we started at Wenfordbridge, which is inland, up the river, Camel? This is an old railway line and it goes all the way down to the coast to Padstow, so it should technically be pretty much slightly downhill the entire way for 18 miles. So pretty, it's so pretty, and it's springtime, so all the primroses are out, the birds are singing, the sun is out, the river is full because it's been raining a lot recently, and it's just lush. The trail surface is kind of gravelly, really tiny gravelly. So it's quite smooth, but it's quite muddy as well. I'm doing this on my gravel bike with gravel tyres on it, not my road tyres, because winter, spring is just so much detritus on paths and lanes. Just got through Wenfordbridge, and now it's just the final stretch to Padstow in the sea. So we made it to Padstow. which is so busy. I did know it would be busy because Padstow is always busy. It's this lovely little fishing town that's sort of been a bit taken over by a celebrity chef years ago, and it's just a huge tourist place now. The Camel Trail was wicked. I'm really glad the forecast was crap, even though the weather turned out to be beautiful, because it's one of those trails that's usually really busy in nice weather, and it was already quite busy with horse riders, cyclists and walkers and runners. So we were in Padstow, had a vegan pasty and a coffee, and now just heading back up into the hills to where we're staying. Almost back at the inn where I was staying. Whew, what a ride! Made it! So that ride along the Camel Trail turned into 56 kilometres and 35 miles. And I know in the video it actually looked like the Camel Trail was empty and we hardly saw anybody, but it was actually quite busy in a lot of places. I just really hate filming other people because they haven't really signed up to appear in random YouTube videos, but also it's actually quite difficult to film when you're trying to weave between people. So the Camel Trail was very busy in places that were within kind of like 10-minute walk of a car park, and there are different car parks spread out along the Camel Trail. And there were some sections where there were loads of dog walkers, loads of cyclists, horse riders, family groups, all of that kind of thing, and that made it quite difficult. And this was a bank holiday weekend, like this is Easter bank holiday, so it's the first warm bank holiday weekend of the year. It wasn't warm, but you know, people will go out anyway. So it was probably a little bit busier than it would be on a random Saturday, but in the summer holidays, so from the end of July to the very beginning of September, I imagine that throughout that sort of 6-7 week period, it's extremely busy a lot of the time. And there are still sections of it that were really quiet, and obviously, as you saw, there were sections that were completely empty, and I could cycle for quite a long time before I would see anyone at all. And then you just get these segments that were really busy. And when you get shared paths like this, of which there are a lot in the UK, so shared paths where you have basically cyclists and walkers, horse riders are less of a problem because nobody minds horse riders, but it's really interesting. Pedestrians really, not all pedestrians obviously, but some pedestrians, some walkers along these kinds of paths really resent having to share paths with cyclists. And you can see why, because obviously cyclists are going or can go really quickly and you can't hear them coming necessarily, whereas pedestrians, walkers are obviously going very slowly and they're often walking 2 or 3 abreast, so they constantly need to, you know, move into single file or at least only 2 abreast and at the edge of the trail to let cyclists past. And I can see why this is irritating, but obviously we don't have very many split cycling and hiking paths here. We just don't have that kind of level of transport infrastructure. So if you're a cyclist on the road, then you're annoying cars because you're not going fast enough. And if you're a cyclist on a shared traffic-free trail with hikers and then cyclists, then you're annoying the hikers because you're going too fast. And I found this quite often on the Camel Trail, which is you would go past someone and you ring your bell to let them know that you're coming up. And even when you ring your bell, some people, like not everybody, some people are just like, oh yeah, hi, whatever. Some people would be quite passive aggressive about it. Oh, like, oh yeah, you've rung your bell, thank you. As in, I guess, implying that other cyclists haven't rung their bells. It's unnecessary because it means you can't win if you don't ring your bell, which I don't always, because sometimes I see pedestrians turn around and they see me and then they sort of slightly move over, and then if I come past, they're like, well, you should have rung your bell. And I was like, you just looked at me straight in the eye. If I ring my bell after I know you've already seen me, that is going to come across that I'm being passive aggressive. Oh my gosh, the politics of English shared trails. I can see it from both points of view because I am a walker as well as a cyclist, and you don't want to be walking along chatting away or, you know, you're listening to the birds and suddenly a cyclist absolutely hoons it past you and you're like, oh my god, I didn't know you were there. You don't want that, but equally, this isn't a battle. We don't need to fight each other. We're just on a shared trail. Sometimes pedestrians would make snarky comments as we cycled past, even though they were already, like the trail can be quite wide in a lot of places. even though they're already right on the left of the trail, which is where you should be walking. Obviously we still obey right and left things on shared trails most of the time. Even though they're already as left as they could, like walking along happily, they might still make snarky comments even if you're cycling quite far to the side of them. But there's nothing they could do in that situation. If you ring your bell, then it's going to make it seem like you want them to move further over, like into the verge, which isn't true at all. So it's a weird one. And this happens quite a lot, I've experienced, on shared trails. Like we have a lot of disused railway lines where you'll get hikers and cyclists on the same trail, and it just really feels like you can't win. It's like people really want to say something to a cyclist, even if the cyclist has rung their bell and given them lots of warning and is giving them lots of space. They still sometimes feel the need to just say something a little bit passive aggressive. So I don't know what that is, and I don't like it very much. It kind of ruins the vibe a bit for me. So that annoyed me a bit on the Camel Trail. It's quite hard. You never know what personality you're coming up to on the trail. And we also weren't cycling fast at all. Like we were cycling very leisurely because there's just no reason to cycle fast. So it wasn't like we were, you know, trying to get a Strava segment or something for the Camel Trail. But aside from that, an awful lot of people on the trail were super friendly and everyone's like smiling because the sun's out and they're having a nice time. And it is a really, really great trail if you just want it completely traffic free and just a straight 18-mile bike ride from one end to the other. I would say the Camel Trail is great for people who want a traffic-free trail, who want it to be flat. It was, as I said, slightly downhill in one direction. Which you couldn't see visually, and like you can't see visually in person either, but you can feel it in your legs. So it's like free speed, you're just going a little bit faster with less effort than usual. If you did it in the opposite direction, it's not going to be a slog, it's not up a hill, but you're not going to get quite the same level of breezy, easy cycling. That being said, obviously you kind of want to do a loop a lot of places. Like if you're going to drive with your bikes to one end and then cycle, you'd still need to get back. So the loop that I did was obviously from my accommodation, but I found it quite nice. I didn't want to do a linear out and back along the Camel Trail itself because at the end of the day it's a really cool trail, but it is just a disused railway line. So it's not the most visually interesting trail to do until you get to the sort of sea end of it, in which case it's a beautiful estuary. So I went cross country, as you saw, to get to the start point of the trail and then rode the trail all the way back and then went up the hill back to my accommodation. I think if you want to do a loop, then that is one of the best ways to do it. Otherwise, you don't have to do the whole thing. You could start in Wenfordbridge and then cycle to Padstow and back, which would be a really short but really lovely ride, especially if you've got kids with you or something. That would be amazing. But broadly speaking, you would have to work out the logistics of how you're going to get to and from a start point. If you want to cycle super fast and be uninterrupted, this is probably not the trail for you, unless you do it in the dead of winter. There are always going to be a lot of walkers and runners on it because it's a very lovely, safe, traffic-free trail. So I wouldn't say this is a trail where you can just like speed along at all. This is not the kind of trail for you. The beginning and the end for me were the best part. So the beginning was incredibly quiet. I hardly saw anyone, but also it was just really vibrant. The forest was really dense, and then there was the river alongside, and it was really, really beautiful. And then the last section of it, where it becomes quite estuarine from Wenfordbridge to Padstow, that was epic because you're cycling along and you can just see the estuary getting wider and wider as you get closer to the sea. So if you only want to do a section of the Camel Trail, I would say the section between Wenfordbridge and Padstow is the best. And then the section from Wenfordbridge to, I don't know, I guess a few miles along is probably the quietest because Wenfordbridge is sort of in the middle of nowhere, and most people, I imagine, would be starting and spending most of their time around the Wenfordbridge and Padstow areas because they're far more busy and popular tourist-wise. So that's the Camel Trail. It's one of the most popular cycle trails in the southwest of the UK. You've also got the Tarka Trail, which I did part of in my November cycle tour, which is here. And then there are other trails like the Granite Way, which goes between Plymouth and Oakhampton, I think. That's a really nice one as well. But these kind of trails are all around the country because we have so many disused railways and canals, things like that, where you can get these really beautiful, flat, traffic-free trails. So let me know in the comments if you have done one of the traffic-free trails in the UK and which one is your favourite if you have, or wherever you are in the world. Do you have these kinds of trails too? Like kind of slightly hidden cycle trails that are just purely cycle and hiking trails? I would really like to know what else is out there because we have so many and there's not enough time in the world to do them all. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.